Hello, my friends. How are you today? We are here for Sewing in Slippers with Sue, and I'm so happy that you are here with me. You caught me having my breakfast, and my breakfast consists today, excuse me, of blueberries out of my garden, local honey from the farmer's market that I went to this week. I've got some Greek yogurt in there and some Voss pecans. So, what does all of this have to do with quilting? Well, many of you know that I'm also a gardener. I'm not just a quilter. In fact, none of us are just quilters, are we? We have so many things going on in our lives and so many aspects of our life. And quilting is just one of those aspects of our life that we absolutely love. And I consider quilting to be that little bit of self care that is so important to leading a well rounded, well adjusted life and having joy and fun in your life. But quilting is not the only thing in my life. I have so many aspects of my life that I have to balance and juggle and make fit together. So today is going to be a little bit about self care, and we're also going to get into a project. So you're looking at my very busy sewing room where everything is out, everything is in progress. You're here with me working on my actual projects, but you're also here with me to find out what's going on inside my mind and what is going on in my world and how that relates to all of you as well. So let me just greet a few people here. We've got Kathy from Ohio. We've got Vicky. I'm hard to understand. It sounds like I'm down a well. Okay. I tell you what, let me check on my microphone. It looks like it's good. It may be that I had a little tickle in my throat. Is it better now? Mary, let me know. Vicki, Kathy, let me know. Yes, I definitely had a tickle in my throat the first few moments that I was talking, and now it seems to have gone away. So I think I'm good, and I'm hoping that was it. Not better. Same issue last week. Oh, Mary Pop. Yes. What does yes mean? Yes, I sound like I'm down a well, or yes, it sounds better. So my microphone is on, it's plugged in, so I think everything's good. I'm not sure what I can do to fix the problem. Okay, after the broadcast, I will play around with that, but for now, we're going to dive right in. So I mentioned that I consider my quilting to be self-care, and I am a big fan of self-care. There are so many different things that I do to care for myself and not my physical self, but I'm talking about me mentally. I do so many things that keep me grounded and keep me surrounded with the right kind of people. I do so many things that keep me in the right state of mind. And a lot of those things I'm doing very, very intentionally because I tend to go down into that tunnel. I tend to go down in that well and I tend to hide when things are not going well. And I can often bury myself in my quilting projects to hide from the rest of the world. And I'm sure we all do that to some extent. But I would rather think of my quilting as not hiding from the rest of the world, but sharing what I love to do with the rest of the world. And a big part of that is just my mindset. If I am telling myself that I'm hiding, if I'm telling myself that I'm going to go down in my sewing room to get away from the craziness of the world, then I have the wrong mindset and I'm bringing the wrong focus to my quilting. I would rather be excited about an idea that I have, be excited about moving forward in a particular project that I've signed up for, or be excited to be making something gorgeous that I'm going to share with my family and friends and with all of you at a later time. So a lot of the self-care that I've been working on is changing the words that my mind is saying to me. And we always have that endless, constant chatter in the back of our heads of our mind telling us um, different things. And if we listen to everything that our mind says, we might be listening to a whole lot of negative talk. And so part of my self care routine is trying to talk back to that negative self talk and turn it around into more positive self talk. So I do a lot of reading. I do a lot of yoga and meditation and prayer and all of those things that ground me and put me in a better state of mind in order to get into my sewing room and be excited about being productive and not coming down here and hiding and being all grumpy. Um, and I just wanted to point that out that if you are using quilting as self care, you want it to be a positive experience. So let's dive in and make quilting a very positive experience by exploring and learning and doing things that light us up and make us excited. And one of the things that makes me the most excited is starting new projects, just exploring new ideas. Excuse me. I shared this with my group last night. We had Applque Design Club for our Ahead of the Curve members last night, and many of you were there. But I shared this with my Design Club members that because I'm a teacher, I have the excuse that I don't have UFOs. I have samples for my classes. So I have a lot of bits and pieces of projects that I have started to test out an idea, to explore a new concept, to explore a new technique. And if I don't like the way it's working, I don't feel like I have to complete that project. I could certainly put it together, slap it together, use it as a dog bed, or use it, if it's anything nice, use it as a comfort quilt for someone. But I don't necessarily even finish projects that I'm not excited about. If it's fairly good, then I'll finish it. If it's not so great and it's just a way to explore a technique, I never have to finish that project. And I want you to think about that philosophy as well. When you are learning something new, you can make mistakes. You can make samples. You can make samples of what to do, and you can make samples of what not to do. And those samples never have to go into your finished project. So we're going to explore a new technique today. If you want to explore right along with me, I'm going to be using strips that I cut last week when I did the Trillium block. So I'm expanding on that triangle quilt idea. And today, instead of making the applique blocks, I'm going to explore the piecing method that I've decided on for the alternating blocks. Vicki says, I shall declare myself an educator with a house full of samples. I do help out at the local event center. That's fabulous. That is fabulous, Vicki. Yes, Bev says, I think that most, if not all of us, need to work harder on self-care. I know I do. Thank you, Bev, for that. It's true. Um, it's something that I've been very consciously working on in the past year is the negative self-talk. You know, that negative self-talk is not you talking to yourself. It's years of other people's opinions, other people's ideas that just pop into your head. And I'm going to give you an example. Have you ever had the most crazy thought pop into your head? The thought of, I should just drive the car right into that tree. Not that I'm suicidal or anything, but just some crazy thought. I should just, um, I should just take that pie that's sitting on the counter and eat the whole thing myself. I mean, silly, ridiculous thoughts that if you were using your brain, that thought would not ever come into your head. So our mind and our brain are two different things. Our mind is this compilation of all of these outside influences, and your brain has to discern what your mind is telling you. Is it good and positive and logical and helpful? Or is it just garbage that comes in and it can come in one ear and go right out the other after you hear your mind say something to you? So a lot of people think their mind and their brain are the same things, or that their mind is that we used to have that little picture of the little angel on one shoulder and the little devil on the other shoulder, and they're each competing with their little ideas, and you have to choose. Are you going to choose the angel, or are you going to choose the fun little devil that tells you to do something, right? So growing up as a Catholic, I always had that picture of the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other shoulder, and they're both shouting things into my brain, and I get to decide which advice I want to take, right? So when you hear these negative thoughts in your head, realize that it's not you and it's not your brain. It's outside influences throwing those ideas around, and you get to decide what is hogwash and what is actually true. Oftentimes, as women or as women of our generation, we listen too much to that argument or that those conflicting ideas going on inside of our mind, and we listen and we take them to heart. And that's something that I'm really working on preventing, letting any of those negative thoughts go to my heart. Because you know what it does? It makes your heart hurt, doesn't it? When you say something negative to yourself, and then all of a sudden it drags you down, and your heart actually hurts. It's like you've got an elephant sitting on your chest when you're hearing these negative things. I'm going to tell you that you can just dismiss those negative thoughts, that they are not part of you. They're part of the world around us saying these things, and we get to discern what we believe and what we don't believe. And I'm going to encourage all of you to throw those negative thoughts right out of your mind and replace it with something exciting and positive. All right. So when I come down into my sewing room, I don't have to go down to my sewing room. I get to go down to my sewing room. I get to go have some fun. I get to go play with fabrics, and I get to be here with all of you enjoying some of the most positive and wonderful people in my life. So that's a little bit about self-care and the journey that I'm on right now. And if you want to join me on that journey, I'm going to give you an opportunity in the chat here to throw out some positive affirmations, some positive thoughts that we can replace those negative thoughts with. Now, I hear from quilters all the time when they go and hold up their quilts at a quilt guild meeting, or I do a lot of quilt guild meetings because I present at guild meetings, and I'm going to a meeting tomorrow night to present to the Cheshire Quilters in Keene, New Hampshire. And I love show and tell, but I know that I'm going to go to show and tell this week, and somebody's going to hold up their gorgeous quilt, and they're going to point out all their mistakes, and they're going to say something like, well, I know this isn't my best work, but before I gave it away, I just wanted to show you because it's been taking up a lot of my time, and I want to show you what I've been working on. Now, is that affirming and positive and self-love right there? No, you've just criticized yourself and your beautiful work. Everybody else in that room is oohing and eyeing over your beautiful quilts, and you're stuck on the binding that didn't go on quite straight, that nobody else is going to notice. So I feel as though we have to, as a generation of quilters, we have to reset our mindset and try to be more positive and more encouraging, just like you would encourage a friend who's a new quilter or a friend who's a quilter that's been quilting for 50 years. you're going to be very positive with them and look at all of their accomplishments rather than their mistakes. And I'm going to challenge you to do that with yourself as well. All right, positive affirmations. I would love to see this chat box light up with positive things that you can say about your quilts. And I'm going to start. I won't put it in the chat, or maybe I will. Okay, the first positive thing that I can say about a quilt, even if I'm not particularly happy with it, how about I love the colors in this quilt. I learned so much from this pattern, right? Something positive. I don't know if I spelled any of that right because I was typing and not looking. Um, if you are excited about your progress, then other people will be excited about your progress as well, even if your quilt is not perfection. It's a step along your journey to achieve beautiful results. And our goal is not to make perfect quilts. Our goal is to make quilts that other people will love and enjoy. All right, I want to see some positive affirmations and some positive quilting affirmations blow up in that chat. So you do that while I go onto my work table, and I'm going to bring my table a little bit closer. And I'm going to show you how I have been experimenting with the design for the alternating blocks on my triangle quilt. And I'm going to work on those triangles with you. And I'm going to show you one that I made just yesterday. Now, many of you know that I've been working with Island Batik, and I can't show you the line of fabric that I'm working with right now. But Island Batik did give me a couple other lines to play with. And this one right here just makes me really happy. I asked for some greens and blues to work with, and they sent me this collection of greens and blues. And I think they're absolutely lovely. So this is how I've decided to piece my alternating blocks. Can you see that there's a seam right here between two fabrics? There's a seam right here between two fabrics. So these are all small strips of fabric that you could take out of your stash. You could use a jelly roll. You could use fat quarters. I just cut about a 4-inch strip off the side of each fat quarter that I'm using. And you can piece together this foundation piece triangle. So how did I go about making that foundation piece triangle? Well, last week, you probably remember that I figured out what size to make my triangle block. And this is how I designed it. I won't go back and do that again because we already did that last week. But I am looking for my long template that fell on the floor. And I'm going to start at the bottom of this foundation. So what is a foundation? Well, a foundation can be a piece of paper. A foundation can be a piece of fabric. So I'm using a fabric foundation, and I'm going to draw in red colored pencil on my fabric foundation to divide up this triangle into strips because I want to make a strip piece block like this, but I want every one to be different. They're all going to have the same flavor, but they're not going to be all the same. So I'm just taking my triangle and I'm going to go back and forth on that triangle with wedges that I'm going to strip piece. And I'm going to make my wedges large on one side and then large on the other side of the triangle. And I want each of the lines to connect the two sides of my triangle. But I'm just being all wonky and kind of crazy with where those lines are placed. So there's no rhyme or reason to those lines. So let's do that again, and I'll walk you through how I'm making the lines. So I'm going to start at the very top of my triangle or at the bottom, one or the other. So I'm actually going to start at the bottom of my triangle. This is going to be the bottom right here. I'm just putting it at an angle so I can lay my ruler across it. And I'm going to draw an angled line that brings one side to the other. And then I'm going to draw a line with a different angle, bringing one side to the other. Now I do have to make sure that all of these angles end up with less than 4 inches across the side because I made my fabric into 4-inch strips. So I want to be able to cover that whole section with a strip of fabric that is 4 inches or less. So I've just drawn another set of lines, and they just kind of zigzag across that block. So I can keep going and doing those all at once, or I can forget about this job right now and go ahead and piece my strips that are going to go across those triangles. And these triangles, I cut all the roughly the same size, but they are oversized so that when I piece my block, actually this one's missing a tip on this triangle because it's oversized. I'm going to end up trimming this block down to something less than the size that I have right here. I don't know what my finished size is going to be right now. So I made it bigger than necessary so I can trim it down to the exact right size before I finish. So I could start at the top. So let's see, a lot of these were angled right to left on the top, so I'm going to go the opposite direction, and I'm just going to go back and forth, making these angles all different widths. You could even do 2 in a row that are the same angle and then change over. They don't have to be all the same, and in fact, it's better when they're not the same. Okay, so after I make all of my angles here, and I'm going to have this one go right off the bottom. Okay, after I make all of my angles, I'm probably going to put in some seams to break up these big, long strips. And those seams are not going to be at any particular angle. In fact, I decided it was easier when my seams are at a right angle to this strip. And I thought that was going to be a little bit boring, doing them all at right angles. But because we're angling our strip pieces, our strip sets, that at a right angle to this line is just fine. It's going off at a crazy angle here. This one is at a totally different angle right here, even though these strips were put end to end with a straight seam. Now, do you need to use straight seams putting your strips end to end? Absolutely not. So let's play around with what happens. How do we make a seam that's not straight across? Well, first of all, let's look at our strip sets. So I cut my strips at 4 inches wide, and then I didn't want my strips to change color midway. So I took 2 fabrics that had similar color tones, and I put them together. Now similar, not the same, but I didn't want to put a white one and a dark green one. And here I have 2 lighter color ones, and there's a seam right here between 2 lighter color ones. So I wanted lighter color strips and darker color strips and bluish color strips. Now you could absolutely put it all together willy-nilly. You don't have to separate your colors like I did. But I decided that I was going to go through that strip set and I was going to put seams together on all of my light green fabrics. I'm just going to seam those all together. And then I'm going to go with my more bluish color fabrics, and I'm going to put seams together with that one. And some of my seams are put together between the leftover pieces that I made from the previous block. So I just took the other end of the strip, and I might have cut it at a crazy angle, here. This one's cut at a crazy angle, but I just straightened up that end and put a straight seam in there. Now, could I have sewn together those crazy angles? Absolutely. You could do like a bias join or a 45-degree angle. That's an easy one to do. But what happens when you want to do some crazy angles? So I've got a crazy angle here, and it's not the same as this crazy angle right here. So how would I end up putting those pieces together if I don't want all of my pieces straight across? Well, these pieces that I've been putting together, I've been doing them all straight across. So after I put them straight across or at an angle, I'm going to trim that seam down to roughly 1/4 of an inch because I was just putting these together. I wasn't paying any attention to making the seams particularly straight, to straightening out the edges of my pieces. I just put them together willy-nilly, quick and easy with no fuss. Now I trim them down to 1/4 of an inch. And I'm going to press that seam open to reduce the bulk. So here's one that's just 2 little pieces. But I do have some crazy pieces here, and I want to see how I would put those together end to end. So this one doesn't have a crazy angle. It actually has a straight up and down, right, a 90-degree angle. But this one right here has this crazy angle. So how would I put these two together? Well, I'm going to lay one on top of the other, creating a nice straight line. And then I'm going to follow that angle with my rotary cutter. And I'm going to take off a little bit. I'm going to change that angle a little bit, just overlapping them, because I've got a pieced seam right here, and I don't want that to be in my final seam. So I'm actually going to change the angle slightly to eliminate that little pieced bit. So that is, who knows what angle that is? I don't know. There's no formula for this. It's not a 45-degree angle. It's just a crazy angle. So how am I going to put those two together to make them come out into a straight line? Well, you're going to do this exactly like you do for a 45-degree angle. We're going to put them right sides together, and we're going to let hang off the end 1/4 of an inch. So I want to make sure that when I put my needle in at this intersection, and I'm going to get this on my board so it'll be easier to show you. The drawback with doing these sessions on YouTube is that I can't use multiple cameras on YouTube. I will be able to. I just have to get some training on a new piece of software that I'm going to use. That's going to allow me to use multiple cameras, but I'm not there yet, but I'm learning. So I'm going to take my ruler just to show you that where these two come together, I'm at 1/4 of an inch away from the edge of this fabric. And where these two ends come together, I'm at the 1/4 inch line. So if I sew a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance right here, I'm going to be able to join these edges together on that weird angle. So my sewing machine's right here. Let's get that sewn. So I apologize. I'm going to have my back to you for just a minute. That just happens to be in my tiny little sewing room. That just so happens to be where my sewing machine is. But I'm going to take a second to sew together that angle with a 1/4 of an inch seam. So 1/4 of an inch seam on mine has to go to a different needle position. Okay, and now I'm going to hold my thread in the back. That's a weird angle, and it may just get caught up in my machine. I don't know how my needle, my stitch length got down to 1.7, but I want a regular stitch length on there so I can go a little faster. Okay, I'm going to just cut that. And there you go. We've got a nice joining seam. making a straight line across. So it doesn't matter what that angle is. It's the same technique that you used to put your binding strips together, even if it's not a 45-degree angle. So let's go ahead and open up that seam. Now, why did I decide not to do these crazy angles when I know that I can do them? Well, it's all about consistency, really. I've got a lot of craziness going on in that pattern with all of these strange little angles. So if I keep these all at right angles, then it lends some consistency to the project. So I could continue to use those right angles, but it's not really going to matter all that much. I can mix it up so I can use all the little bits and scraps of fabric. If I have fabric that has an angle on it already, I can just lay that over. This one's really long, so I'm going to cut it. Remember, my strips to go across that triangle are only yay long, maybe 16, 18 inches. So if I have a really long strip like this one, it's going to go over multiple pieces. So I can just cut that off. And now I'm going to lay this one over the top of that one. I'm going to squeeze it over as much as I can so I get the best use out of my fabric. I have no idea what that angle is, but I'm going to follow that angle all the way across or create a slightly different one. And then I'm going to overlap so that the little divot between the two pieces here and down here is 1/4 of an inch away. If it's not 1/4 of an inch away, you're going to slide it either down towards you or up and away. And you can see the little triangle that is resulting here with your quilter's eye. You're going to be able to judge that 1/4 of an inch, and you don't even have to use your ruler to do that. So I could go ahead and bring this to the sewing machine. Sew on that line, 1/4 of an inch away, and I'm going to have another beautiful straight line. So once we have all of our straight line strips, I'm going to take one of my foundations, and I like to start at the bottom. You could start at the top. I just like using a larger strip of fabric and go up to the smaller strips. Seems like it gets done faster that way. So how are we going to get started here? Well, I'm going to take that seam that I've just made, and I want to make sure that it is, I need my scissors. Hold on, lost my scissors once again. I'm constantly losing things, but that's okay. In my sewing room, there are scissors everywhere. So let's go ahead and trim up that seam, because I just did it willy-nilly. I did about 1/2 of an inch seam because I could. My fabrics were kind of frayed at the edges. I washed the fabrics, I pressed them, but I didn't square up all the ends. So they were frayed, they were uneven. So I just overlapped those fabrics and I sewed them with about 1/2 of an inch seam to get rid of all those frayed edges. And now I'm trimming it down and making it pretty. Now I'm going to take that strip and I'm going to place it on my foundation. And I'm going to put the edge of that strip on my red line. And when I put those two strips together, I've got a little jog right here. So I'm going to straighten it out, right? This is such a forgiving technique. I'm going to take that fabric and I'm going to put my fabric along the edge of the narrower piece. And I'm just going to trim this one down so it makes a nice straight line. And then I'm going to place that straight line on the straight line that I'm working on. So I'm going to work on this red line right here. And I'm going to put two fabrics right sides together. Well, I have that beautiful light color fabric with a lot of blue in it. So I'm going to put that next to this one. That's another dark blue or green, blue-green fabric. I haven't used this one yet. I didn't use it in the other piece. The other piece was more green and less blue-green. Like it has one blue-green down the middle. So I'm going to put this blue-green more towards the bottom. And this one has that crazy angle. Let's see what that's going to look like. So I'm going to Let's see. Yeah, I'm going to put these two edges together, right sides together. I'm putting the edges of the fabrics together, and they're both on that red line. Now, these are big, long pieces of fabric, and I'm not going to cut those down because when I cut them off at the weird angles of that triangle, I want that extra fabric to be able to cut those off, have a nice little angle, and have that leftover piece be a full piece. If I hack it off right now and then I cut the angle, I'm going to end up with all these little chunks. So I don't want those little chunks. So I could take a pin and put it in right here. I could take a pin and put it in right here, or I can just wing it. And I'm all about winging it because this is supposed to be a quick and fun project. So I'm going to go to my machine using my 1/4 inch foot. I'm going to sew that on the red line with a 1/4 inch foot, with a 1/4 inch seam, in other words. And then I'm going to cut my threads. And I'll bring that over. So this is a traditional foundation piecing method. This is very similar to what you would do, say, with a log cabin. But I like to use the fabric foundation in order to get an idea of where to cut those fabrics for that design that I'm looking to achieve. So all of those red lines, they're now covered up with the fabric. So how do we know where to cut these pieces? So let's take a look at our design that we drew on the fabric. All right, I'm going to take a look at that next line that I want to work on. Let's see if I even covered that line. I didn't quite cover it, so we're going to have to change our angle for that next line. Because even though my pieces are about 4 inches wide, this one here, it's 4 inches from the tip, but it's not 4 inches from where the direction that it's going. So I'm going to have to change that next line. So let's just add another one in. So instead of this line being so wide, I'm going to add another line in right here. Some other angle, doesn't matter. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so I'm going to fold back my foundation fabric on that line. That's the next line that I'm going to be using. So I'm going to fold my foundation back on that line, yet I'm going to leave all of my fabric nice and flat. All of the fabric that I just pieced together, I'm going to leave that nice and flat. And look what I can do. I can actually follow the edge of the triangle now to get rid of some of that excess fabric. So let's trim off this end. Now you can trim it even with your triangle. You can leave it a little bit bigger. Even with the triangle is fine. I know the white triangle is bigger than I need, so I'm going to leave it at even with the edge of the triangle as best as possible. But that triangle, okay, is starting to get covered with my other fabrics. So let's look at that next line that we want to piece on. Originally, my next line was way up here, and I need it to come down to here. So I need to create a new line, so I've just done that, and I'm going to fold back on that line, but I'm going to put my fabric forward. So I'm folding back on that line just to see that I'm covering everything. And I'm going to add a 1/4 inch beyond that line. This is like using your add a 1/4 ruler for paper piecing, but instead of using paper, you're using fabric. Same idea. Now we've covered that line. Okay, we've got our extra 1/4 inch here, and now we're going to put our next piece of fabric. So what do you think we need next? What color? How about some of those light greens or maybe the bright greens? Let's do a bright green. Well, I've got them all seamed together, layer after layer after layer. So let me check which one do I like best. So that looks good to me. I'm going to press this seam open. And of course, you would do this in stages. After you do all of your seams joining everything together, then you would press them all open so you don't have to do each individual one. Or play around with it like I do. Do them one at a time, that's perfectly fine. And now that we have that straight edge where we added that 1/4 of an inch, we're going to decide where we want this next seam to go. I've got a seam between two fabrics there. We've got the big print and then we've got the smaller print. So I'm going to take that seam and place it somewhere along that strip. And now I'm going to stitch that again. I'm going to bring all this extra with me. I don't want to cut it off yet because it'll leave me some weird old chunks, and I don't want weird chunks. I want nice, big, long strips to work with. Let's sew that together with a 1/4 of an inch seam. Okay, so just like paper piecing, it's basically the same technique. Okay, so if it's basically the same technique as paper piecing, why do it, right? Why use a fabric foundation when I'm getting the same result as I would with paper piecing? By the way, there is a person, her name is Rebecca Bryan from Bryan House Quilts, that does an amazing class with paper pieced triangles. She does all types of kaleidoscope design. She does absolutely beautiful quilts. She has a membership. If you are intrigued with what we're doing today, her process is fabulous. She's doing it with paper. I'm doing a similar but different thing with fabric because I want to leave my foundations in. There's not much that I like less than pulling away paper foundations from a paper piecing project. I just don't enjoy that process. So I like using the fabric foundations for a couple of reasons. First of all, you've got all of these different pieces of fabric going at all wonky angles. If you were to just sew these together, even with paper piecing, and then pull apart the paper, there's no stability there. There's nothing that's going to keep those edges from stretching. By doing this on the fabric foundation, at least you have that fabric. I know some of the edges because we're at a 60-degree triangle. These edges are probably all on the bias. There might be one edge on the straight. But when you cover these with all these different fabrics and all these different seams, it stabilizes those edges so they're no longer stretchy. So we're going to continue to cover this fabric, and our next seam is right here. So I'm going to pull back that, I'm going to lay everything flat on the table, and then I'm going to pull back that fabric foundation until I find the next seam. And that's right here. Okay, so I'm going to take that seam and I'm going to add a 1/4 of an inch so that I'm getting the design that I drew on the foundation. Now that design that I drew on the foundation was very haphazard. There was no rhyme or reason to it. It was what I decided to draw at that moment. So if you're off on your seams, nobody's going to know, okay? Doesn't matter whatsoever if you're doing your next seam accurately or not. It's just a guideline. So you know I've added a big piece here, it's wider here. Next time it's going to be wider over here. And then it's going to be wider over on the other side. So the picture just gives you an idea of what to do next. but there's no compulsion to follow the pattern that you've created. So we're going to continue in this manner, adding 1/4 of an inch so that the next piece that goes on, and let's take um, a nice light piece, and I really wish I had some lighter blue. Here we are. Yeah, the one I wanted to use had fallen on the floor. So let's go ahead and use this lighter blue. And then we're just going to say, okay, I want these greens together, or I want the blue and the green together like this. I want this seam to be somewhat up here because this one is here, and I don't want them to line up one next to the other. That covers your triangle. This end covers your triangle, so you know you're good to go. So you lay it out the way it's going to be sewn. And then once you're happy with that, then line up those straight edges, make your seam, fold it back out and press it, and then find your next angle. So I hope that all makes sense to you, how I put these foundation pieces together. I need to make 12 or 13 of these. I need to make 12 or 13 applique blocks, and I'm really excited to be in my sewing room playing with this new design idea. It is total playtime when I get into my sewing room, and I just love being here to play along with all of you. Now I'm going to take a minute because I want to look at some of those affirmations. And while I do, I'm going to read some of your comments as well. Okay, let's see. I see some great Christmas trees in that pattern. I want to get back to where I was when I left. The humidity is definitely not pleasant in southern Ohio. We need to work harder on self-care. That was from Bev, and that's pretty much where I left off. Vicky says, absolutely crazy creative thoughts that I can make all this stuff on my own. Then I can digitize it, design it, write it out. But once it is at the point I know it works, I'm off to a new one. Vicky, you're just like me. Once you know your idea works, then you're off to the next idea, and that's fine. You enjoy the creative process more than the finished products. And there are many, many quilters like us out there, Vicky, and that's fine. Don't beat yourself up about not being a finisher. You can be a starter and you can be what do you call that? A pioneer, right? You're playing with new ideas, you're digitizing them, you're having fun with them. You're coming up with new ideas that you can teach somebody else. And you don't necessarily have to be a finisher in order to do that. And I'm just like you. Deb says she sees some great Christmas trees in that pattern. I love it. Here's a positive affirmation. I can make all of Sue's designs. Absolutely, Deb. You absolutely can make all of my designs. And you can even have fun with your own. You are learning so much that you can even go off script and do something a little bit different. Doesn't have to be exactly like mine. I love that. You go, Bev. Thanks, Kat. Being cautious to keep 3 tips when you trim it down. Absolutely. I do need all 3 tips on my triangles. Yeah, where is the microphone? Interesting. I betcha maybe it's picking up the microphone that's over by my sewing machine and not the one that's over here. I'll have to check that out. All right, I'm not seeing a whole lot of positive affirmations out there, ladies. I would love to see some positive affirmations coming into that chat. So let's do that together. Kat, you love watching my creativity. That's a great positive affirmation for me. I want some positive affirmations that you can say to yourself. I want you to find some positive affirmations that say, I can be just as creative as Sue. I can play with these designs and they never have to be finished. I can make this quilt when Sue comes out with the pattern. There are lots of positive affirmations that you can tell yourself when you tend to get down, when you tend to retreat into your sewing room as an escape. I want you to be thinking about the positive way that you are impacting the world by bringing your beautiful quilts and your beautiful colors and your gorgeous designs into this world. So I want to see loads of positive affirmations between this week and next week when you rewatch this video. And for those people that are watching it on the replay, keep those positive affirmations coming. I'm going to use some of these positive affirmations in my newsletter. And we're going to talk about a little bit more self care. I also want to give you some resources. A couple of books that I've read recently that are really helpful. Um, a couple of websites that I've been looking at that are really helpful. And just some other quilters that I find inspiring, like Rebecca Bryan from Bryan House Quilts. I will link down below to her website. She is a powerhouse. She is a dynamite quilter, uses beautiful modern solid colors, completely different from my style, and I absolutely love her style. So I'd love to see some more positive affirmations. I'm going to share some information with you in my newsletter that I take from this session today. So if you don't already get my newsletter, I put out the Applique Cafe every weekend, whether it's Friday or Saturday, so you can read it over the weekend. And in the Applique Cafe, I share applique tips and tricks with you, what's coming up in our Ahead of the Curve membership, what's coming up for our next courses and quilt alongs, and anything else that's happening in my life. And my main article next week, I hope to incorporate some of your positive affirmations. So keep them coming. Now we're going to be starting our gradations quilt in just about 1 month. We started our True Colors of Springtime quilt last week in our quilt along. So if you would like to quilt along with us and make True Colors of Springtime, or you'd like to get started in August and make gradations, both of those courses are enrolling right now. Yes, we already did get started with our kickoff for True Colors of Springtime. But even if you start now, you are never behind. Our courses are lifelong courses. Once you have them, you don't lose them. When your quilt is done, you can tell us it's done and you'll start getting emails from us. But when you are making that quilt, we're going to keep supporting you throughout the time that you make that quilt with an active community on Facebook and with some check-ins from me along the way. So I hope you'll join us for one of our courses for our membership or in the Applique Cafe newsletter where you'll hear all of my ramblings and information about what's coming up next in my applique world. So that reminds you, Bev, you need to sign up for gradations. Okay, don't forget, our Platinum Leaf members get half off of our current quilt alongs. So I'll be sending out a notice to all of our Platinum members this week to remind you if you want to do gradations, you only pay half for all of our courses that we're running currently as a quilt along. So great. Anybody that's purchased gradations before, you're going to get an email too saying, come back and join us. We're going to get started with gradations on August 7th, and that email is yet to go out. So if you've purchased gradations in the past, you will be invited back, and I'll be sending out that email today or tomorrow. All right, ladies, it's been so much fun. Keep those positive affirmations coming, not only into this group chat right here, but in your own mind. Remember, you can dispute anything that your mind tells you. If it's not something positive, you let it go in one ear and right out the other. You grab onto those positive affirmations. And when you repeat those over and over again to yourself, It'll crowd out the negative voices that you may be hearing, and you'll have a lot more pleasant experience being creative, having fun, being good to yourself. That's what it's all about. When you are good to yourself, you put a better you out into the world, so you'll be better for everyone else around you. More positive, more calm, more relaxed, and enjoying your life even more. The ripple effect of that is amazing. And I hope that I put those positive ripples out into your world today and help you be creative with your coping designs. It's been a pleasure to be here on Sewing and Slippers with all of you. Mwah! Until next time, I will see you all very soon. Love you guys.